Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Lisa Elvin Stoltari, and I'm a genealogist and a passionate traveler. Over the last year or so, I've been featuring Filles du Roi, the series Filles du Roi, but I've just now started Les Filles à Marier, which is a whole other series. And we're getting to know Les Filles à Marier, which are the marriageable girls, one at a time, just like the Filles du Roi. And I am trying to do one a week. And so we are on to episode 16, so you can see how early on in the series we are. If you have any recommendations of Filles Mariée that you'd like me to do, please send me a note, and I'd be glad to put her on the list. Before we begin, let's review a few ways that you can support the channel. We can subscribe, notify, and like. These are all ways of spreading the word. And then if you want to go a little bit further and really support the channel, you can do a super thanks, which YouTube lets me do now that I've gotten over 1,000 subscribers. And then there is other platforms called Patreon and Coffee. These are all ways that you can show your support. I want to reach out and thank all of you who have supported me thus far. Really appreciate your words of encouragement. So Les Filles à Marier it was not a program, it was just a group of ladies, about 260 of them, that came between 1634 and 1662. It averages out to 2 or 3 a year. So obviously, this was not a state-run program. It was just individual people, churches, priests, explorers, that sort of thing, who would bring and encourage a girl to come aboard and marry a man. So this was done kind of, kind of a personal referral, if you will. So they did not receive any compensation. So I would assume their passages were paid to some extent, and they were supported. But it was not like Les Filles du Roi. That was a truly government program that the girls were given money and that sort of thing. These were even more pioneers because they really were coming into the wilderness that was New France. In fact, 1634 really marks the beginning of anything really happening in Quebec, because up until that moment, there had been a little bit of a settlement, and then the English took it over. And by 1632, the French got back their country, and then by 1634, they were back in the saddle, so to speak, and they had to truly begin to build a true colony. So let's see the ladies that came. Our fille mariée of this episode is Francoise Mery. And I chose her not because of a viewer request. I didn't have one that I can be sure of. But I read the story in Peter J. Gagne's book, and I thought, I want to explore this a little bit more. And then when I turned around and looked in my files, sure enough, the boy next door that I grew up with, that this is his great-grandmother as well. So here's to you. Let's find out all about Francoise. We do not know where exactly she comes from, but we believe, based on Peter J. Gagne's book and other resources that she probably comes from Tourove, Perche, which is part of in the Normandy region of France. In the 3 decades starting in 1632, a large proportion of immigrants to New France came from Perche in what has been called the Percheron immigration movement. They were often recruited to work in the seigneuries being established along the St. Lawrence Valley. And Robert Giffard of that area was given a seigneurie by the Company of 100 Associates. Nearly all French Canadians can lay claim to an ancestor from this area. And some of the very famous names, they're classic French Canadian surnames: Boucher, Côté, Cloutier, Dion, Tremblay, Peretti. These are very classic, old French Canadian families. So, and that is where they're in the church at Tourove is a monument to a lot of the immigrants that came to New France. And I believe that she is one of them. So Antoine Brassard is the groom that would eventually select her. He was born in 1609. His parents are unknown, and all we know is that he is from Normandy. So she was, if we are correct, they were both from that Normandy region. So Antoine was a mason and would arrive in New France sometime between 1633 and 1637. As was typical of the engagé at the time, he would have signed a 3-year contract and been free to marry by 1637. This puts his arrival at about 1634. Remember that during this time they were truly rebuilding New France. And this was a major period of, just trying to create a true country of New France. And Antoine was there. We're pretty sure that Francoise would have arrived sometime in 1636 because obviously there are no ships crossing the Atlantic. They were married January 14th, 1637. So I suspect sometime in the summer or late fall is when Francoise would have come. They were married at that time. And here's a funny kind of thing. I haven't seen this before. I'm sure I'll see it again. But they returned to France. In 1639, they returned to France where 2 of their children were born. So for whatever reason, probably work, maybe a family matter, that sort of thing, they crossed the ocean together and then they would eventually come back to New France. So they would settle, when they came back, they would settle in Quebec City. Quebec City is the capital city of the province of Quebec. 500,000 people live directly in Quebec City at the moment. Quebec was originally named by the Algonquins who named the area Quebec, Quebec, which in their native language means where the river narrows. Quebec City lies where the St. Lawrence River narrows. Samuel de Champlain founded a French settlement here in 1608 and called it Ville de Québec, or Quebec City. The city walls which surround it still date back to this time period, making Quebec City the only city with remaining city walls north of Mexico City. There's so much to see in Quebec City. We could go on and on and on, but one of the things that charms me the most is the Maison Jacquet. This house is the oldest surviving private residence in Quebec City, dating back from 1675. And if you'd like to tour it, it's the home to a famous restaurant appropriately called Aux Anciens Canadiens, roughly translated to our old Canadians or to our historic Canadians. We also have Le Petit Champlain, which claims to be the oldest commercial district in North America. In the middle of this slide, we have a map of Quebec City as it would have been illustrated in 1700, and then a map of just to give you an idea of where it's situated and what it looks like, and then you're coming down the St. Lawrence River and you're getting off at Quebec City. And then we have the 1666 census. I do not have one for the 1667, but we have Antoine Brassard, we have his wife, and then we have their children listed: Guillaume, Antoine, Jean-Baptiste, Louis, and Dorothy. So this is their family. Where else could they go? Would eventually move to Sillery. Sillery is now one of the boroughs of Quebec, but for well over 3 centuries, it was its own independent Sillery. In 2002, Sillery, along with other small cities, was amalgamated into the larger region of Quebec City. Sillery was first established as Canada's first Indian reserve. It was first named Saint Joseph, and the money for establishing the first settlement was provided by a man named Noël Brulard de Sillery. Unfortunately, the native population fell victim to disease and other issues, and the reserve failed. The town was eventually named Sillery in honor of its benefactor and would become an important player in Quebec's lumber industry. On the upper left of your screen is a picture of Sillery's waterfront, which I like to imagine that it looks the same now as it did in the 1600s. And then and also on the top right is how it became amalgamated into the city of Quebec. And then we have Sillery on the map here. And on the bottom right, we have La Maison des Jésuites, which was there when Francoise was there. And so I just love Antoine and Francoise were here. We're in Sillery. That house still stands. It is now a museum, which I plan on visiting. But we have the 1681 census, which I love. I mean, look at the history. We have Antoine Brassard. We have Francoise Mery. Their son Guillaume, Antoine, Jean, Louis, Dorothée, three beasts, which I assume means cattle, but could be anything. Please let me know in the comments below if you know what that means. 27 arpents, voilà. This is a lot of land. So we have between 22 and 24 acres of land. Remarkable. Go on to have 9 children. Antoine, who was born in France, died before his 2nd birthday. Jeanne would marry Jacques Edouin and have 8 children, all of whom would make it. Marie-Madeleine would marry Louis Fontaine, have 15 children, 10 of whom would make it. Marguerite would marry Jean Lemelay and have 8 children, all of whom would make it. Guillaume would marry Catherine Louvet and have 6 children, 4 of whom would make it. Antoine would become an Indian interpreter. Not much information on him, though, so if you have any, please let me know. Jean-Baptiste would marry Jeanne Cailloux and have 12 children, 7 of whom would make it. Louis would marry Simone Moffat and have 9 children, 4 of whom would make it. Dorothée would marry Pierre Richer and have 9 children, all of whom would make it. Just remarkable. So Antoine died between 1668 and 1669. At that last date, he and Francoise would have been married about 31 years, and he would have been about 59 years old. Francoise herself would carry on for another 2 years, dying at her house suddenly, as was written in the burial record. She was living on La Grande Allée, which is where she and Antoine made their home for so many years. That's a picture of La Grande Allée in Quebec City. Imagine. That is where they lived. And as of 1729, they would have an astonishing 670 descendants. And now you know why I picked them. Because I just couldn't believe that when I saw it. I said, this has got to touch a lot of people. So let me know if you are one of it. I'm not, but I would love to find out who's a descendant of this amazing couple. And here are a list of resources that I absolutely recommend for Quebec research, especially into the deep, beginnings of it all. And also, I'd love to include some societies that you might want to look at. I've got all the listing of it. Today, I want to talk to you a little bit about Maple Stars and Stripes. It's a podcast. You need to look at it and listen to it. I've told many people how finding Sandra Goodwin put me on a new path. She brought it to life for me. And I can't thank her enough. She really is one of my genealogical idols. So thank you, Sandra, for the contributions you are making to French Canadian research. And like I said, all of the addresses for all of these resources are there for you to explore. I mean, what a life they had, Francoise and Antoine. I mean, it's just a remarkable, the beginnings of it. They got married, they had children, they survived, and it's just a lovely, lovely love story. And I think that certainly the number of descendants points to the solidness and the strength of this couple. If you are descended from them, you can be very, very proud of that really strong pioneer stock, because obviously it runs through your veins as well. So we want to thank Francoise for her contribution, for her sacrifices, for her commitment to building New France. And we will remember her. Until I see you on episode number 17, I will say au revoir.